Hello, Art 109. Our artist this week is Dr. Carolyn Mazloomi, and she does prefer to be called Dr. Mazloomi, so we will honor that. Dr. Mazloomi is an author, curator, quilter, social justice advocate, and aerospace engineer currently living in Cincinnati, Ohio. She was born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana in 1948 to a family of artists and creative people. She did obtain her PhD as an aerospace engineer from USC. We're going to be looking at her art making this week. She makes quilts, and those quilts are narratives that tell stories around themes of family life, women's rights, political freedom, and musical legacies. Let's look a bit more into her artist's background first. About her childhood, she says, "I was born in Baton Rouge and had a very simple childhood. I was a very quiet person and very much the bookworm, and concentrated more on my studies and reading and not so much extracurricular activities, but just a good student and always loved books and reading." So quilts aren't her first love, right? Her main interest was in airplanes, but once she discovered quilting, she embraced it wholeheartedly. At some point, she relocated to Cincinnati for her husband's job, and so then switched focus a bit to art. This region, where we are, Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, is known more for its tradition of quilting, and that inspired our artist. Fast forward, and her work has been exhibited in galleries around the country. Dr. Mazloomi also curates exhibits of African American quilts, and she's written many books about the art form as well, including the influential Spirits of the Cloth and Visioning Human Rights in the New Millennium. Dr. Mazloomi is also the founder of the Women of Color Quilters Network, an organization created to promote the quilters and their quilts. She is an artist with a mission who shines her light on the art form of quilt making and its reflection of the African American community. Now let's consider the historical context behind the art quilt movement that allows for Dr. Mazloomi's contemporary work. So fiber art and textiles were long underappreciated in the art world up until the 1950s and 60s. At this time, an influential exhibit at the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York City mounted the first comprehensive exhibition of quilts to be seen at a major museum. At the same time, many contemporary artists such as Robert Rauschenberg, Eva Hesse, and Miriam Shapiro were beginning to incorporate soft materials into their works of art. So what followed was the art quilt movement, which is a series of art quilt exhibitions, publications, and studio workshops of quilts that tended to be larger than the traditional bed quilt, that often pushed the boundaries of traditional quilt patterns, shapes, and materials. One goal of both radical feminism and racial politics during the 1970s was to change what was considered art, and quilts as art were a part of that. There were three national cultural developments that contributed to the reevaluation of quilts as respected art forms, and those developments were the art museum's legitimization of the quilt as art, the junction of art and craft at the university level, and social and political trends. Artist Theresa May was a founding member of the art quilt movement. Her work is pictured on this slide. She explains, "This quilt started from an old portrait of me that I did in the mid-1970s. It was very small, but I wanted to finish it, so I added a wide border, then machine quilted it, and decided that I needed to make these marks on it to help overcome the lifelong feeling of not mattering or not counting. The painted marks on the surface represent counting me in, so therefore I matter." So quilts can certainly have as much meaning as other art forms, right? As mentioned earlier, Dr. Mazloomi founded the Women of Color Quilters Network, which is a nonprofit collective that intends to foster and preserve the art of quilt making among women of color. The organization offers quilts and fiber art to museums for exhibition and researches and documents African American quilt making. Members of the organization are provided a venue for sharing technical information, grant writing, and a network of quilters that ensure their work is showcased nationally and internationally. The organization also values social and economic development projects and offers educational workshops that foster exposure to the arts, creative development, and improved self-esteem. And we can't refer to African American quilt makers without referring to Gee's Bend as a part of this historical context. When enslaved women from the rural, isolated community of Boykin, Alabama, better known as Gee's Bend, began quilting in the 19th century, so that's the 1800s, it arose from a physical need for warmth rather than a quest to reinvent an art form. Yet, by piecing together scraps of fabric and clothing, they were creating abstract designs that had never before been expressed with quilts. When you think of quilts, you think of pattern and symmetry, so they were doing something different. These patterns and piecing styles were passed down over generations, surviving slavery, the antebellum South, and Jim Crow. During the Civil Rights Movement in 1966, the Freedom Quilting Bee was established as a way for African American women from Gee's Bend and nearby towns to gain economic independence. And by the way, a bee is a gathering space for people, namely women, to come together to put these quilts together, which can be a big task that takes multiple people doing different parts of the quilt. The Freedom Quilting Bee Cooperative began to sell quilts throughout the U.S., gaining recognition for the freeform, seemingly improvised designs that had long been the hallmark of local quilt design. As awareness grew, so did acclaim. Throughout history, the collective process of quilt making has inspired larger social justice initiatives. One of the most well-known is the NAMES Project AIDS Memorial Quilt, conceived in 1985 by activist Cleve Jones. It acts as a collective memorial to the lives of people who have died of AIDS-related causes. Each square represented a person, and you can imagine a mother or other family member creating a square for their loved one who did not survive the AIDS epidemic. Quilts are associated with comfort and care and love. There was activism surrounding the AIDS crisis because the government and president at the time, Ronald Reagan, legislators really didn't do anything to help because this disease mainly affected the queer community, which was very stigmatized. So you see it here square by square, person after person, laid out on the lawn in D.C. Very impactful project. But there are other collective social quilting projects which include the Monument Quilt Project, which aimed to collect the stories of survivors of sexual assault and intimate partner violence, the Red Quilt Solidarity Project that raises awareness of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, the Invasive Queer Kudzu Project that aims to tell the story of LGBTQ+ participants and illuminate Southern queer culture. There is the Freedom Quilt Hungary Project that was created to unite people around the topic of free speech and democracy, and the Collective Mending Sessions Project that seeks to create socially engaging workshops that center around mending quilts. So quilts, throughout time and recent history certainly, have been used to raise awareness about certain social justice initiatives. So that's all going to come together into Dr. Mazloomi's work. So here's one of her pieces, Mother's Work. You'll notice she largely uses a black and white color palette, saying, "I like black and white because it's stark. There is nothing to get in the way between the viewer and the message. It's very plain to see there is no distraction. The message is in the forefront of everything." She also relates it to newspaper print, and we're going to see her address social and political moments in her work coming up. You may have also noticed that this example doesn't quite look quilted, so let me explain the artist's process. She draws the design in black and white and then prints it out on a large industrial printer on fabric, and then she quilts it using a quilting machine. So if you look close, you can see the indentions in the fabric, and that is the quilting. Now let's take in the subject matter. A woman carrying a baby on her back, lifting a picked sunflower to the sun. You'll notice a theme in her work of mother as teacher. She says, I like to create quilts that deal with the status of women because women are important. They have the most important job on the planet. As the first teachers of their children, it's a very influential position to be in. Women influence every human being on the planet as mothers, as first teachers, as nurturers. Here are a couple of other examples of this theme in her work, along with the idea of family and generations. We have Second Time Around on the left, which shows a grandmother holding the next generation, and Sacred Union on the right, a family portrait with a cityscape and fun floral patterns. The dove with the laurel branch in the top right corner represents the Holy Spirit in art, which adds to the Sacred Union title she gives the artwork, which alludes to marriage. By the way, these are large-scale quilts. They're anywhere from 8 to 10 feet tall. You'll notice her quilts almost look like a block print. She does actually make prints of her work and sells those at a lesser rate because one-of-one quilts are going to be very expensive and exclusive, and she doesn't want her work to be like that. So here's a couple other examples. They're very beautiful. All the patterns. Also notice that in her quilts, the subject matter, the design in the center extends beyond the border, which I think is really, really fun compositionally. Clearly, this work, Peacemaker's Gift number 2, is more socially and politically inclined. There are elements of beauty often present in quilts here. The flowers bordering the bottom, the pattern on the woman's cape in the center, but there's still a strong message. There are men holding guns on the left side, pointing toward a line of pregnant women on the right. In the center is a black woman staring out at the viewer while holding a crying baby. So what is your interpretation of this? Narratives of social justice are a reoccurring theme and very important to our artist. The last example we looked at was open for interpretation, but a lot of Dr. Mazloomi's work literally spells out the message on the quilt and is very clear. For example, this quilt, certain restrictions do apply. We have the Statue of Liberty, a symbol of America welcoming immigrants to the American dream, with a portion of her accompanying poem, Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore, send these homeless, tempest-tossed to me. We also have people in boats in swirling water as they try to make it to the cityscape beyond. But there's a catch here. The artist includes a stop sign in Liberty's hand, replacing her burning torch. The other hand is in a stop gesture as well. Then across the top in large letters, the artist includes certain restrictions do apply, implying that America does not live up to its original promise. Along with her thoughts on immigration, Dr. Mazloomi also recognizes that art and quilt making is a visual way to record the times, saying, quilts are like cultural documents. You have people all over the world who study quilts. So hundreds of years from now, people will be looking at the quilts made today. They get a glimpse into the timbre of the times, what was happening in our country, our families, our communities, our churches, and with the individual quilter. So this is why I say they're important cultural documents that tell the story of not only the individual maker, but our country. That's important. People have to know each quilt documents a story. So Dr. Mazloomi recognizes that immigration is an issue and topic in current American society and records her thoughts on it in the format of a quilt, which is a uniquely American craft and tradition. I want to acknowledge the strong and painful imagery here in the artwork, Strange Fruit 2. The artist is referring to Billie Holiday in the song she sang, Strange Fruit, which refers to lynchings occurring in the South. The artist represents the lyrics in a visual way, including the singer on the left side, as well as KK members at the bottom, with an American flag, along with victims hanging from a tree. The artist, like Billie Holiday did, is acknowledging this history of injustice and violence towards black people in America, especially the South, where quilting would be a tradition. So imagine a quilt's purpose, comfort, love, and care, and history juxtaposed with the subject matter. It's very affecting. Dr. Mazloomi also did a colorful quilt of Billie Holiday wearing flowers in her hair, choosing the color blue to represent the genre of music she sang, and gave it the title, A Lady Sings the Blues. So, most of her quilts are in black and white, but here we have a color quilt, and this is also kind of just one example of how she addresses sort of musical legacies as well as social issues. Here are a couple more of her works that represent narratives of social justice. The artwork on the left is called Maid, spelled M-A-I-D in America, referring to the history of African American women being repressed into domestic labor. And on the right, Picking Away Dreams, is a more contemporary reference to child labor and being born into a certain labor force. The smile there on the young girl is an act of resistance, according to the artist. This is a more recent work that addresses racism in America. This is called Hands Up, Don't Shoot, and its imagery includes an aerial view of a ship transporting the enslaved. She combines this with the image of an American flag. In the place of the 50 stars, you see 50 black figures with their hands raised with a target on their chest. On the red stripes are names of people that have been killed by police. She says in an interview that you'll watch, "Every time I think I'm finished with the quilt, and then more people are killed. And the quilt is to honor those victims that have been killed by police and victims of police brutality. So it seems somewhat a never-ending project. I know at some point I have to say, okay, this is enough, so I keep adding names to it." The piece is huge. It's 14 or 15 feet wide, so yes, it's a work in progress. This quilt was created before the murder of George Floyd, but that event would impact her and her work as well. She said, "I watched the newscast, which had a video of George Floyd being murdered, and it was gut-wrenching. For me as a mother, when I heard him call out for his mother, knowing that his death was near, it was like a clarion call to me. I felt that I had to do something to call attention to racism and police brutality. And as a curator, the first thing I think about is an art show. Remember, our artist also curates works of art as well, which means putting art together from multiple artists into an art exhibit that sends a combined message." Continuing with her quote, she says, "So I called the director of the Textile Center, and asked for his help in finding venues, and I curated 7 exhibitions that opened around the Minneapolis area." Minneapolis is where the George Floyd murder occurred. "The 2 juried exhibitions I put out a call for, I was really surprised," this is once again the artist speaking, "because people around the world responded." Through these curated shows, Dr. Mazloomi was able to present multiple perspectives and a global approach to the moment. The exhibits were a visual way for artists to share their own experiences with racism and police brutality. They also commemorated victims. She said, "Another one of the purposes of putting together these exhibitions is so people come and they can have a conversation in a safe place, in a museum or art center, about these difficult topics. This is a good thing to bring people together. So we're using art to do that. And it's about race and reconciliation." All right, that's it for this week.